GM, everyone. Welcome to Flywheel, your number one source for everything Frax DeFi and everything in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, you've come to the right place. This is DeFi Dave, here with Capital K, and we are here to help you harness the power of the Flywheel. And on this beautiful, sunny afternoon, we had a very special in-person interview with none other than Charlie Pyle of Hourglass, formerly known as Pitch. Charlie's building something really interesting, really innovative, brand spanking new, and we go right into it in the interview. Kit, initial thoughts on this one?
You know me, I try to ask the hard-hitting questions for the listeners, and I really tried my hardest here, but Charlie, yes, I would say architected something quite amazing.
Yeah, it was really funny. The entire interview, Kit, you can see him frustrated. He was like, "What? Where's the hole I can poke? Where's where can I chop down here?" And he can't find it until the very end. He has something, but even Charlie's like, "Oh, I thought of that."
Yeah, it was good. I'm stoked for this product.
Yeah, and I'm stoked for everyone to watch this one. So make sure you stay tuned. If you want to catch up with everything Flywheel, make sure you subscribe to your Substack, flywheeloutput.com. Make sure you hit that bell button and subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. We got some nice, juicy clips that we've been pumping out, and you definitely want to stick around for that on Twitter. And make sure you follow us on Telegram, join the conversation there at Flywheel DeFi, and at Twitter, Flywheel DeFi. Follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
Follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And I'd like to add a special disclaimer to this episode. Hourglass, I'm an advisor to Hourglass. Hourglass is supported by Piff Labs, who supports Flywheel. Wanted to get that disclaimer out of the way. And now that's out of the way, let's get the Flywheel spinning. Do you hold ETH but don't know what to do with it? Want to earn those juicy liquid staking derivative yields but don't know where to start? Well, FrxETH is there for you. FrxETH is Frax's native LSD solution, allowing you to earn boosted yields in multiple ways on your ETH. If you want to get started, go to app.frax.finance and turn your ETH into FrxETH today. Outdoor, sunny, spring equinox edition of Flywheel. We're celebrating Passover, Good Friday, and Easter this Sunday. We're all accepting of all religions here at Flywheel. And today, we have on Charlie, the founder and chief architect of Hourglass, formerly known as Pitch. Charlie, people have been wondering, where have you been? You've been in the lab. You've been cooking with the crew. Can you give us an update about how has this evolution of Pitch into Hourglasses happened, and what are you up to at Hourglass?
Yeah, man. Happy to jump in. I mean, I've been on chain. Not much is different every day. I wake up, I check Etherscan, I do the usual. But it's really been a community-driven effort, actually. A lot of the stuff that the development sort of folks have been doing and contributing originally came about from people in the Telegram and the Discord having some really good ideas about taking what we were doing and then generalizing it. And back in the day, for anyone who doesn't know, we were focused a lot on the time-locked FrxETH ecosystem. Specifically, we've been building a lot on Frax. And this notion of adding time as a way of signaling loyalty into these different DeFi protocols, it was really cool. It was saying, if I like Frax and I'm going to stick with them for a year, 2 years, 10 years, I should probably get some bonus perks from the community, right? The protocol might want to give me some extra tokens, or they come up with something, at least to give me points, because I'm a huge supporter. I'm not just, some mercenary guy who's showing up and leaving tomorrow.
You're a missionary.
We're missionaries, right? We're trying to do real things. We legitimately are, right? So the people who are part of that mission, I think, can be rewarded on a wide spectrum of token design mechanisms and stuff like that. And without getting too abstract about it, we realized that we could sort of generalize the protocol from everything we did on locked governance tokens to just applying time to all of DeFi. And in doing that, the name Pitch didn't really make sense anymore, because we're no longer just about pitching incentives and pitching ideas. It was about time. So the community and us, we decided to call it Hourglass.
Okay, so the evolution of pitch, you went on focusing governance tokens to focusing on time itself. So it's very fitting that your name is Hourglass.
That's right. Yeah, and specifically the problem that we're trying to solve is
Literally my
around.
next question. We're probably trying to solve.
We're reading each other's minds here. It's this problem of user loyalty, right? And it's like if I'm going to be loyal to a protocol, I should be rewarded for that. And similarly, the protocol should be able to convince me out the gate to be loyal. I think anyone who's been involved in the ecosystem for the last 1 to 4 years has seen just boatloads of mercenary capital. Someone who shows up and they'll deploy tokens, or they'll participate, and then as soon as the times get bad, they'll dip out, right? And as a protocol, it's really hard to build a long-standing piece of software, a piece of community, if everyone just dips the second that they show up. And we can really easily build mechanisms to support long-term loyalty, whether it's time locks, or there's either other stuff you can do. And we're trying to help protocols basically build that into the native ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really a matter of stickiness, and that's thrown around a lot. Whether it's the stickiness of the community, sticking around through the bull and bear, whether it's the stickiness of liquidity. You guys make stickiness in the code. You like write it in the code. Like when the liquidity is there, it's there.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's visibly there too, which is somewhat unique compared to, say, the traditional banking system, which has had quite a bit of problems. This is being filmed in April of 2023. In the last month or two, has seen the opacity of finance really become more relevant than ever. And being able to see not only that there's tokens in a protocol, but there's tokens in a protocol for a long time. That for the next 6 months, we know for sure that this protocol has this much backing it. They have these communities locked in place, these partnerships going. It's very meaningful to building things on top of it.
Yeah. So now let's break down with how Hourglass works. Can we get into like the nuts and bolts? Like, what's the process of yeah, basically what it works, how it works, what it does, like what's being supported on it off the bat.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've talked a lot about sort of abstract stuff in the last minute, so I think it'd be great to get into the nuts and bolts. There's only really one protocol right now in the whole DeFi ecosystem that actually cares about, and when I say cares about, actively pays for and incentivizes long-term liquidity, and that's Frax. There's other flavors of this, right? Curve will pay for locked up governance tokens, but only Frax will say, hey, if you take your Frax stablecoin and you lock it up against anything else, we'll give you more token incentives. It's called this gauge system where every week people vote and there's new FrxETH given out to the long-term liquidity providers. And this is instrumental to the ecosystem. I mean, Frax was originally known for being fractionally reserved. They had about a 90% collateral ratio. The reason it was impossible to depeg is because the reason they could not depeg is because you literally could not withdraw and sell the liquidity for the period of time that it was locked, right? Without locked liquidity, Frax probably wouldn't have made it through the last 1 to 2 years. The protocol would be dead. Now, the problem with locked liquidity in Frax is that say that you have 10, 20 million bucks and you want to support the ecosystem, and you do, and say you lock it up for 2 years. Yeah, exactly. Once you do that, you're stuck, right? You have a $10, $20 million lock on chain, but if you want to borrow against it, if you want to sell part of it, if you want to share it with somebody else, if you just want to do anything, you can't. You're locked in a smart contract that has absolutely no programmability on top of it. And what we're doing is basically just adding that layer on top. The thing that we're releasing in just a couple days, if not a week or two, is just a staking page on top of the Frax ecosystem, the Frax and Convex ecosystem, really, so that when people stake into the Frax ecosystem, say you're providing liquidity for Frax USDC, say you're providing liquidity for FrxETH and ETH, if you do it through us, you get back a tokenized position. And this tokenized position, it can be, it's like an NFT, right? Because your 1 year lock is different from my 6 month lock. But they're not completely non-fungible because you can fractionalize it. If you have 100 locked up ETH, you can split it in half. You can sell 50 of it. You can do 50, whatever you want with half of it, say. But it's similar to the other people. So we have a somewhat novel design. I'm happy to jump into the technicals of how it works, but it'll provide a whole new layer of programmability into the Frax ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah, so Charlie, I really wanted to know who's your target customer or user for Hourglass?
That's a great question. So I think trivially, you would say that we're trying to support folks staking in the Frax ecosystem, and we absolutely are. At least out the gate, we want anyone who's going to participate in Frax, whether they're staking their FrxETH, say they care about the new liquid staking token, which is very hot. We want them to stake through us because that means that we'll be providing a tokenized layer on top and all these new tools you can do with it. But then I think the other interesting thing is we actually want other protocols to look at us and say, hey, it's cool that Frax has built up 100, $200 million of liquidity for the next 1 to 2 years, and that's not going anywhere, right? And especially as something like Shanghai goes live and ETH can be unstaked in just about a week from when we're filming this. Say you're Lido, say you're Coinbase ETH, say you're Rocket Pool, and you're like, man, all these people, they keep unstaking from our validators, and we have these incentive tokens, but we're just paying them to mercenary liquidity that's leaving tomorrow. We should instead pay people to stay with us. And maybe they don't just lock up the vanilla token. Maybe they take, let's just use staked ETH as an example. Maybe they take staked ETH and they lend it on Aave, and then they get back a staked ETH, and then they deposit that for a year. And now Aave, now 3 people are winning at once, right? For the next 1 year, Aave has guaranteed staked ETH that can be borrowed. Lido has guaranteed staked ETH that's not being withdrawn from validators, and Ethereum itself has long-term security because this is not leaving the actual blockchain. So for all 3 of those layers, you can have different incentives across the board. Aave might be using some kind of token sharing, Lido might have token sharing, etc. Right? And this is a novel primitive that applies to literally any protocol in the DeFi ecosystem or just the crypto token world.
And the fourth party is also the user themselves, right? Because they get a boosted yield for, locking it up and kind of deferring their liquidity.
That's right. So the real person this is rewarding is the missionary, right? Like say that you really cared about staked ETH, you cared about Lido, Aave, etc. Before this came out, you would have gotten paid the same incentives as everybody else, even though you cared way more. It's like you're a true diehard fan, and all the people who don't even care, they're getting the same rewards as you. And it's annoying because your sort of preference, your loyalty, your time opinion cannot be expressed. And now you can uniquely express your loyalty to somebody, and you're going to get boosted rewards for that. So you as a user should be happy about this because it'll differentiate you from those folks who don't care.
So how does those boosted rewards play out? Can protocols have different, incentive programs saying like, hey, if you lock for this long, like we'll give you, boosted emissions, or is it some other way? Like, how do you imagine that playing out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it'll be completely unique to every protocol, right? I think every protocol is going to have their own desires for how long they need their different liquidity for, how much they care about the long-term usage. So some protocols like a stablecoin might just care about having lots of people locked up in 2-week tranches. They might not need 20 years, but they just might want lots of 2 weeks because maybe that prevents a bank run, right? Say everyone rushes to withdraw, but they can't because they need to wait for the next 2 weeks. So there's this solid buffer that will signal, hey, we should probably go fix this, right? Just imagine if during the Silicon Valley bank crisis a couple of weeks back, people couldn't all go on their phones on the bus and withdraw all their money instantly and pretty much send the bank bankrupt. I mean, the craziest part of that whole story is that SVB realized this was going on. I think it was in the mid-afternoon on Thursday. People were withdrawing quickly. And they had a bunch of really good treasuries. They had a bunch of really good mortgage-backed securities on their balance sheet that they could have borrowed against. They could have basically borrowed against their balance sheet, gotten 10, 20 billion bucks from the Fed, the lender of last resort. But they couldn't because the Fed actually closes at 4 p.m. Eastern. So they called the Fed, and the Fed said, sorry, we're closed right now. It's 4 p.m. Eastern. So
That's so crazy to think about.
We actually
sorry, we're closed.
We can't lend this to you right now. And because SVB had to wait 24 hours, I think they didn't even get it on Friday. By Friday, they were considered bankrupt, right? And there's one side of the problem here is the Fed side, right? If that was instant, that'd be nice. But of course, it'd also be pretty crazy if you could just snap your fingers and get 20 billion from the Fed. So I think the real easy problem to solve here is you shouldn't let everyone sell within the same 2-second window. Mobile banking has given us a lot of great pros in the universe. But for every feature, there's a bug. And I think the critical one is that consumers move way faster than the institutional structural side. So a bank might just say, hey, you can deposit with us, but you can only withdraw 5 to 10% a day up to 14 days. And just expressing that small little piece of time alone is a complete paradigm shift in how we understand loyalty and how we understand stability in these ecosystems.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about how the traditional banking system and traditional finance technologically hasn't caught up with not just crypto but consumer banking apps, like the fact that people can just withdraw and send money in an instantaneous, whether it's like Venmo or PayPal, and that hasn't gone down the line to the more traditional institutions. Well, you have like Fed Now coming in July, it looks like, but before that, like it's funny to think how antiquated traditional finance is for America being such a superpower. And your innovation is not just for crypto, but for all of finance, if you think about it, because like locked liquidity is so important when you can move money instantaneously.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because on one hand, traditional finance is antiquated and some of the back office stuff and the way that the Fed has to lend. But then on the other hand, some of it's just too advanced, right? Mobile banking and all these innovations happened within the scale of seconds on the global history. And there's just no way that these institutions could have predicted that, 10 years ago, everyone would have a magic phone where you can withdraw 50 million in 5 minutes when you're on a bus ride to a retreat. Like these are problems that the institutions didn't have to solve for. And now they're new problems and they require new solutions too.
Yeah, it's like fractional reserve banking wasn't meant for the instantaneous settlement age, because once people see that the full, not all the reserves are there, they're gonna, they're gonna leave. And so, if you're gonna have like a full reserve system, for that full reserve system to be functional and capital efficient, you need to have locked liquidity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fractional reserve banking is a really nuanced topic, so I won't pretend to speak to all the complications of it. But definitely having time guarantees is a useful tool that you can add to your box when preventing systematic structural issues like this.
Yeah, I'm just kind of sitting back here and thinking about all of the structured products that you can kind of create on top of this now that you added this time element to it. And I think this is a particularly more useful on the crypto side than TradFi, just because, in the crypto side, they have governance tokens or rewards to emit versus on the TradFi, which is, obviously not possible. So, but I want to get back into Hourglass specifically, and could you walk us through like how it works, and ideally from both user journeys, the retail user and as well as a DAO who currently does not have any time mechanics?
Yeah, 100%. So I'll start with the retail in the Frax case because the Frax case is already running this, right? So it's the least sort of speculative about what could happen. Um, it's actually not too complicated. If you go to the Frax page today to stake a token, say you have some LP token or you have just some thing in the Frax system and you want to stake it for a period of time and earn rewards, you just go to, I believe it's app.frax.finance/staking. I think that's the actual URL you would go to, right? And instead of going to that site, in the future, you can just go to the Hourglass website, and we're basically just a layer on top of that. And we have all the same boosts and all of the same material. And basically, if they just go to their favorite pool, say you have a FrxETH liquidity pool token on Curve, and you want to stake that through Convex and then onto Frax. I know it's a lot of jargon for folks who aren't familiar with the ecosystem. Say you come to our website, Hourglass, you would see that exact pool, and you could press the stake button, and maybe you stake for the maximum duration because you want the most rewards, which I think as of today is about 1 year. You hit stake, and then you get back this. It's an ERC 1155, so it's somewhere between an NFT and an ERC 20. Not when basically an NFT, right, is a token where you have this specific token ID, and that identifies you. So if you have token ID 2 on the Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT contract, that means that you own ape number 2, right? In this case, ID number 2 might not correspond to an ape. It might correspond to maybe May 2024, which is the year that your token would unlock. So now it corresponds to an expiry. And then under that token ID, you might have a balance of like 100, and that means that you own 100 tokens that you staked, which will unlock on that specific date, right? And now that you have this cool token, you can do things with it. You can do things like sell it. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do with it. I'll kind of leave that as an exercise to the user. You could build all sorts of products on top of it, but that's just like the core unit. And then from there, the sky's the limit as to what you do with it.
Build structures.
And a quick follow up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Dave. A quick follow up on it. Now, let's say user B also deposits into that same expiry. Do the user B also receive that same ERC 1155 token?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. They do. So you would basically get pooled together, and then the two of you would now have balances on the same ID balance smart contract, right? And then you would both have rewards distributed basically to the two of you collectively. So you can come to the page whenever you want to withdraw your rewards, and the both of you would see a claim button. You could hit claim and then go into your wallet. And then if either of you wanted to do anything with it, like say you wanted to sell it, one of you could transfer it without affecting the other because you have independent sort of accounting.
God, how fine is this slice and dice? Is it down to like May
it's 1
8th,
way
2020? Oh, sorry, yeah. Is it like to like the second to like the per block difference? So if I had, did the exact same expiry as you did, but I did it 1 block after you, do I have my own separate ERC1155?
Great question. So it's precise down to the second, to the Unix timestamp, but you might have some complications if they get really fragmented, right? So if you go through our website, we will suggest for you. In the beginning, I think we're going to have monthly sort of separations. We're going to have the May version, the June version, etc. But say someone like really wanted this very, very specific thing, like June 17th at 3:33 p.m. You can go into the smart contract itself on Etherscan, and you can directly deposit, and you get back a very specific ERC 1155 just for you, if that's what you wanted.
Yeah, I want something at November 11th at 11:11 a.m.
That'd be kind of cool. 111111.
So you have these, lock liquidity, lock tokens, and you can, put them on a marketplace. How do you ensure that there's liquidity in this marketplace for these locked assets?
It's actually a very hard question. And this was the thing that took a lot of sort of discussions back and forth with the community, because tokens that have time on them are different from tokens that don't for somewhat obvious reasons, right? And almost every app in the world of crypto today has been built around tokens that don't have time on them. And it's because you can aggregate them together. So if you have 10 ETH and I have 10 ETH, we can put them into a Uniswap pool. We can put them into an Aave pool. And the code knows that they're all the same. They're completely fungible, right? Time is not fungible. Your time at 6 months and 3 days is not the same as my time at 7 months and 5 days. And there's no way that Aave can know the difference without programming in some normative statement about how the universe should operate. Aave would have to say, yeah, the interest rate's going to dynamically move according to this time period, or etc. You could create a unique Uniswap pool for each specific time section. Maybe you have a Uniswap pool for May, for July, for September. But then you would need liquidity providers for every single version of that pool. You would need them to care. You would have crazy slippage if it accidentally went one direction or the other. It's a nightmare, right? So if you think about it from a token engineering perspective, it's complicated. If you think about it from a math perspective, it's not that bad, right? People have been pricing time for the last meaningfully for the last 100 years, but really for thousands of years, right? I'm not saying that these things are options, but there are a lot of similarities between this and an option. This is just one model you could potentially use where you have, say you have ETH that unlocks in a month. You could analyze how volatile the ETH is. There's some implied or explicit volatility. You could look at the time values. You could just run the distance to now. There's a couple of different components. There's the underlying yield. And then with all of that, you can assign potentially maybe a slight discount. You would say, okay, you have an ETH, which in 1 month becomes liquid. I think it's worth 0.95 according to my model of the universe. And then you might have your own model, right? And rather than having separate token pools for all of this, it'd be really nice if you could just put up basically a cryptographic signature saying, I think that 1 month is worth a 5% discount. And then I put my own signature saying, I think 1 month is worth a 4% discount. And then say that Kit maybe has his 1 month token, and he's like, I think it's worth 3% discounts. I don't agree with either of you guys. And then he could put up his own signature saying, hey, if anyone agrees with my logic, I'll give it to you right now, 3% discount. I'm putting up a signature right here. And the second somebody agrees, they can just submit a corresponding signature, and then boom, you could just swap the tokens, no problem, right? And with something like that, then you can just have everything on the same page, and you're aggregating at the opinion level rather than at the token level.
So is it like a central limit order book kind of structure, where it's like, all the discount rates would obviously tier upward with the lowest discount on the bottom?
Yeah, good question. I think that eventually you could make something really sophisticated like that, where you have some order matching engine and it's maybe running on some server and it's running a bunch of calculations. In the beginning, I think the simplest model is very similar to OpenSea, actually, where you can just log on the page and you can say, oh, here's locked ETH. And in 2 months it unlocks and it's 2% off. Maybe I'll buy it right now. And then you submit your own signature. So there's no complicated matching engine or anything like that. It's I think the contemporary expression is an RFQ system, but it's just an easy way to visualize the different prices.
Got it.
So, okay, did you have any other questions?
Nah, I'm just thinking more along, like, would you need a market maker to kind of facilitate this liquidity, or do you think it would be fairly liquid day one?
It's a great question. I personally, and I can't speak obviously on behalf of any organization, blah, 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 but if I saw ETH that was being listed for 50% off and it expired in a month, or in 1 month it would unlock, I would buy that. I'd happily buy ETH for 50%
Not financial
off.
advice.
Yeah, this is not financial advice, all of the usual. But I think that there's a lot of folks who probably would look at that and say, oh, 99% off. Like, that's not a bad deal. So you might want to have some sophisticated actors who are setting sort of, oh, I think it's worth this much and that much. But I think that because these things are pretty well understood, like most people know ETH and they know how far a month away is, you'll probably get some pretty good sort of opinions expressed quickly.
I have a question. So what is your plan for onboarding users, and what is your plan for onboarding protocols outside of Frax?
That's lots of good questions today.
That's why we're here.
So basically on the Frax side, the event we're most interested in is Shanghai, right? Shanghai is next week. There's like $10-20 billion of staked ETH out there today. Most of it with not Frax. Frax is a little bit, but most of it's not Frax. And then there's a lot of ETH that hasn't yet been staked because folks want to make sure that Shanghai works and that you can withstake it or unstake it one day, right? So knowing that, there's probably going to be more ETH staked on Frax pretty soon. I think FrxETH will continue to go up. Again, not financial advice. There's a lot of reasons that might not happen. But when we were talking to sort of community members, we thought FrxETH is probably going to grow pretty soon. So we want to make sure that if FrxETH does grow and people are depositing into this sort of new token, they do it through us, right? So that if all of the new FrxETH is going into the Curve Convex ecosystem, say people want that max yield, I think right now, as of today, it's making like 9% or something. If folks want to earn 9-ish% on their ETH and they go through us, then we can sort of start to test these systems and we'll get 10-month locked ETH and 3-month locked ETH into the ecosystem. And with that, then we can start to see, okay, what do people think the discount should be? Do people think the 6 months should be 5% off, 50% off, et cetera? And we can start to get the basic rails of the project down. And then doing that, once you just have even a little bit of sort of tokens flowing through the system, then we can go to someone like Balancer, someone like Lido. We've actually been chatting with a lot of these folks already for the last few months. And we can say, hey, we have the system and it works. And there's people using it right now and there's real discounts. And then knowing that, they might have an easier time convincing their users to participate in a similar system. Because, and this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say today, one of the most important, but very non-obviously, I was wondering, why does no one else do this except for Frax, right? Because it seems like a good system. You want lots of long-term users. You're going to inflate the tokens anyway. Like if you're printing these tokens, may as well give it to your supporters. Why does no one do it? And I think it's because, let's pretend that I'm Balancer for a second. I run an AMM and I tell everyone, hey guys, we're turning on this new system where if you give us your LP tokens for a year, we boost you. But you need to put it in for at least a month because if you don't do a month, we'll give you nothing. Otherwise, you get nothing at all. And then say I'm now an LP and I look at Balancer and I'm like, they want me to lock up? That sounds annoying. Then I can't do anything for the next month, right? I'm just going to go to Curve because they don't make me do that. Like Curve is no problem. I can just go LP on Curve and then if I want to dip, I can, right? Well, now Balancer just set up a system that drained all their users because now all their users went somewhere else because the users really value that flexibility, especially after the last year or two. However, let's say that there's a robust ecosystem where say you lock up with Balancer for 3 months and you have a bunch of stables that unlock in 3 months. And if you really, really need to go, if you really need to get out, you can always just sell your locked position for a reasonable discount, maybe 1% off, whatever you consider reasonable. Well, then it's not that big of a problem anymore because you either wait the 3 months and you get out or you have the option to leave if you desire. And suddenly Balancer is able to turn on a program like this and not scare off everybody. And then if Balancer succeeds and they turn it on and not everyone runs away, well, then Curve can turn on their own program because Curve's like, well, now everybody's getting locked up in Balancer. We need to start competing for our long-term liquidity. So then Curve maybe turns on their ecosystem. And before you know it, all of these different DeFi sort of products and protocols, they have a new paradigm of how they incentivize user behavior.
Yeah, this is a quite poignant topic right now because of all the rage quit proposals we've seen over the past few months. Imagine if there was a market where people could just sell their positions, which are still earning some percentage at a discount, rather than have to pay this tax or go through like this friction that we see in governance. There'd just be an open market for it, and it would be a lot less contentious in the community.
Yeah, they could just rage sell instead of rage quitting, and then just set a maximum discount.
Let the market price it. Yeah.
Yeah. But Charlie, I mean,
yeah,
this sounds almost like too good to be true, as if there is no downside to it, right? It feels like you get to A, reward your most loyal users, and B, you get to protect your liquidity and really know what, perfect your liquidity management. But what are some risks that the DAO or the user, or both, has to consider?
I mean, you guys have great questions. I think the primary sort of problem with this is that, say you're a user and you wanted to just LP in some program, you wanted to provide liquidity and then dip tomorrow and maybe go buy a house and then buy a car and then come back and do it again. It's all going to move a bit slower, right? If you provide liquidity for a month, you can sell immediately, but that'll cause you to take a discount. Maybe you don't want a discount. Maybe you wanted to just get in, get out, and leave. I think the person that this is really going to cause the most harm to is the quote unquote mercenary. It's the one who wanted to move really fast and break things with money. Because this is going to slow down the entire ecosystem. And that is both pros and cons. The con is what I just described from an individual user's perspective. You are losing a bit of that instantaneous flexibility. One other thing that this actually starts to hurt is it'll be harder to do things like flash loans. If you wanted to like LP and then borrow against that and do a bunch of fun activities in the single block, you can't just do that and still participate in these reward systems because you're stuck. Actually, something that we're explicitly adding to our protocol, which I don't think anyone's done before, is say that you want to withdraw, say you've unlocked and you want to get out. We actually don't let people get out all in one atomic unit block. You need to first submit a request to leave, and then you need to wait a time period. I don't know how long it's going to be yet. It'll be like 5, maybe 30 minutes. And then you can withdraw your liquidity. And that's annoying as a user, right? You want to get out immediately. But we think that small inconvenience to the user is going to save the entire smart contract from getting drained all at once. If a wrong key gets hacked, if something goes wrong in the protocol security, if someone submits a malicious transaction and tries to drain it all, they literally can't. They'll need to wait 30 minutes. And then because of that, you can have really clever systems. Like say that you have a user whose dedicated role is they're a monitor. People run this all the time with like MEV. It's a monitoring bot, and you look out for malicious transactions. You look for someone trying to drain everything immediately. Maybe you have a couple of these people, and these are like your watchers. And if they see this, they have privileged access to call a pause function. And that just pauses the whole thing. They say, yo, someone just submitted a really bad request. We're pausing everything. And then you have the protocol's governance basically decide, are these watchers doing their job? Are they missing things? Are they being too zealous? Are they pausing things intentionally, like too much? And then you have a system of checks and balances so that you can never have the whole contract drained instantly. It'd be literally impossible.
This is the Hourglass Night's Watch, everyone. On call 24/7, protecting the network, the protocol for malicious mercenaries and actors.
Yeah,
this is the watcher on the vault.
Yeah, Watcher of the Vault. But you bring up an interesting facet because it seems I could imagine the watchers having some optimistic setup or optimistic governance setup where they basically have the privilege and right to do whatever they want and take action unilaterally and quick in the moment if they see something malicious. But at the end of the day, maybe like let's say the watchers are malicious or the token holders see them doing something that they don't like doing. The token holders can have final say like, no, we revoke your privileges. But there's this good checks and balances that we see that could possibly happen with Hourglass.
Yeah, I think every system that's scaled well has had really well-designed checks and balances throughout, right? Whether it's the U.S. government and you have states and the Fed and you have the judicial branch and the legislative, or it's corporate governance and you have a board and an operating team and you have shareholders that can dictate the board. Like you want to solve the principal agent problem, right? You don't want the person who has all the power to be able to do things that break the system. And it's not impossible to set these things up. All you need is, say, a watcher, governance that has control over the watcher, some set of quorum so that it's not just one person. And these systems get much, much, much more robust. And all you need to sacrifice is instantaneous withdrawals or now 5 or 10-minute withdrawals.
Okay, I'm trying to think of some second order effects here, and I'm picturing each of these expiries almost as like an OTC order, right? A large buyer can come in and actually just sweep the floor, quote unquote, and acquire a large set of FXS, for example, right? And let's say they took over the FXS, CVFXS pool, and they eat all of that up. Now, this large purchaser should have, without your product, gone to the open market and buy FXS directly, and therefore pumping the price. But if they were able to buy it from an OTC desk or this kind of marketplace instead, then there will be minimal price movement. Um, I'm I'm just trying to think of like ways to poke holes because this sounds so good to be true that I'm having a hard time finding holes. But yeah, that was the one thing I can think of is like it takes buying pressure away from the natural LP pools, and people would just go into these and just buy blocks of FXS, for example.
That's a great point, right? I think that there probably will be some insulation provided on the primary market if a large buyer went to go buy the 6-month version instead. I think one of the reasons this hasn't really existed before is because that somewhat resembles, say, a yield curve for an asset, where now you can look into the future and you say, how much is the thing discounted according to time? How much is the implied yield, right? The discount is in some ways also the yield, they're inverted.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, when the person is sweeping, they might not be making the price of the asset go up, but they might be affecting the yield curve down the line. So now we're making statements about the future value of FXS, even if the present value is ostensibly the same. And then
Mm-hmm.
potentially someone might see that and say, wow, that the future value of FXS is now much more valuable. So then maybe I should readjust how I price the present value. Of course, there's a lot of math here. Like, it's very complex. I can't pretend to have done all of the nuanced work, but I imagine other folks out there will have models that will do this kind of calculus.
I'm thinking about what you said earlier about having this delay of 5 to 30 minutes. This reminds me of the delay that exists in the traditional world of like if I want to send a large transaction, usually it takes like, or like even a standard wire takes like a day or 2 days to process. You still need to have that process for something to go through and make sure it isn't malicious. It just happens a lot faster, but also not as fast as like me just like not as fast as a traditional AMM order.
That's right. Yeah, I think there is probably going to be some mean reversion here, right? Where the old-fashioned world was 3 to 5 day processes, never worked on the weekends. The Fed lending desk closed at 1 p.m. Pacific, and that's obviously too slow. And then you have the other side of the spectrum, which is way too fast, and you can drain 200 million from Euler in a heartbeat, and there's nothing that can be done, right? And then you ideally want something Goldilocks zone, which is not
Goldilocks
instantaneous.
zone.
Yeah, and you don't want 5 years or 5 days. You want 5 minutes, and then you get most of the pros, but it prevents these nightmare situations as well.
Yeah, I mean, the moment you brought this up, in my mind, the spectrum is centralization, Fed closing at 1 p.m. Pacific, and then decentralization, Euler being completely rugged. I mean, there's a happy ending there, but nonetheless, that happened in like 0.2 seconds. Now, in this middle point, we rebrand it and call it a check and balance system, where now you get
Exactly.
both the benefits of the decentralization, but also the centralization. But then we're just going to call it checks and balance. And I think that 15 minutes or 30 minutes is such a small inconvenience to the user. I think that's a no brainer. I think that's a great system to put into place. And now, I mean, I'm trying to think of like what are some second and third order effects
Oh,
that
I
you
have,
are imagining. Okay,
oh,
go ahead, Dave.
I have a question. So, Uniswap, a protocol that we know and love, is known for, being immutable, being permissionless, being really the gold standard of DeFi and like one of the most similar to Ethereum in how it's built and in its ethos. How does Hourglass get on that path of being this, permissionless, immutable protocol in the future?
It's a great question, right? I mean, the first thing I would note is that in many ways, Uniswap is immutable and it's like, frozen in time forever. But also, they release a new version every 6 to 12 months. So I think that you should
Hmm.
have systems in place so that as people need to make changes, you can do it without, they're not breaking changes, right? They don't affect everyone who's already committed to the old system.
Mm-hmm.
So just out the gate, we're trying to set up our system so that we can deploy new versions in real time. And everyone who's in the first version, everything that they were doing is completely uninterrupted, right? So we're basically always adding new optionality for folks without destroying back the previous versions. And I think that's just a general good software practice. But on the sort of permissionless just runs perpetually section, I think a lot about what the future of blockchain development looks like, right? And some of that I think is having a smart contract where you can verify signatures and perform atomic computation. Because the things you want to solve for, right? You want to have censorship resistance. That's very, very important. That's probably the most important thing, right? Is that people can't turn you off and they can't say, hey, you can't use the system for X, Y, and Z reason. And that's all handled by the smart contract. That's handled because you can create your own signature. You can swap autonomously. You want to be running to the best of your ability 24/7. You want availability. That's handled because the EVM is running these. Someone is running a node operator, basically the Ethereum virtual machine constantly. There's other ways to handle that too. You could have, say, with EigenLayer, someone download as an operator some other piece of software that runs on top of the EVM, and then maybe this is an engine that uses Oracle prices about real-world assets, and it will use an approved process to say, hey, this is how much XYZ tokens worth in the real world. Or maybe it's just like a matching engine, because ultimately every layer of the rollup stack you move up from L1 to, say, a ZK rollup, and then you can have L3s and L4s on top of that, is just outsourcing computation further and further up the stack. So I think there's a number of things you can do to basically ensure availability while preventing censorship resistance from entering the system.
Wait, don't you mean preventing censorship?
That's right. By preventing censorship from entering the system.
We're encouraging censorship resistance, everyone. Not preventing it.
That's right, yeah.
You talked about L2s, L3s, L4s. I'm curious how Hourglass is structured. Are you guys going to be on mainnet? Is it going to be on an L2? Have you guys decided that? Or is it going to be on multiple L2s? Or even something else entirely? What's your plan there?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so our system is designed to be as modular as possible, meaning that the core of it is really there's just a few parts, right? The first part is where the tokens actually get locked. So in this case, say that Lido wants to ensure that staked ETH is in Aave. That STETH would need to get deposited in a vault and not move for a period of time. All right, so we have one smart contract that's mostly right now on Ethereum, because most of the stuff in the world happens on Ethereum. And then we have the next part of the system. That's the receipt contract. That's the claim. That's the ERC1155 is what they call it. You could mint somebody that on Ethereum, but it'd also be very easy to basically, on the locking, send a message decentralized to Arbitrum, to ZK Sync, to wherever, and say, hey, you should mint a receipt of this much value, this much ID. And then boom, you can mint a receipt over on a different blockchain if you wanted. Because then the third step of our system is basically a place for people to match signatures and then swap the 1155 for anything else, for Ethereum, for whatever. Because we don't want to have any opinions in our code. We don't want to say that we think it should be worth this much of a discount. We don't want to imply certain ratios. I think that requiring ratios is the cause of a lot of Oracle attacks and technical problems. So that code is also very modular, because you could deploy the signature matcher on an L2, deploy it an L1 and an L3. So on any blockchain, all you really need is the 1155 and then a signature matching engine, because then on top of the matching engine, you can build anything. You could build swappers. You could build, if you wanted to, some lend-borrow system. Basically, the sky's the limit for building on top of signature matching. And that happens on any blockchain you like with almost no problems. It's just two smart contract deployments.
And there are no oracles, because people are just setting their own price and coming to agreements, however they decide to, right? It's just an open market, right?
That's right, yeah. There's no oracle problem here for that reason.
Nice. Very key.
Yeah.
Kid's just wondering, where can I poke a hole here?
I really am. I'm trying so hard, Charlie, and I think you've done a really well job kind of designing this space right now in this architecture. And I guess I'm just trying to understand what's on the roadmap, what's to come immediately, and what's to come in the next 6 months, and then a year, 3 years.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. It's not just me on the phone talking right now. This is the product of a whole team of people in the community and elsewhere who've really been helpful in thinking through the system from front to back. And the step now is just to put it live, right? It sounds great in a conversation, but it's not on the computer yet. It doesn't work. People aren't using it. We want to change all of that. So starting in the next few weeks, we're going to start rolling out basically every week or two. We should be having new things coming out for the next little while. We just have a lot of interesting artwork, actual code on the smart contract side, and then on the website side that just needs to get rolled out and tested. So in the very beginning, we just want to support Frax. Frax is the only protocol that actually incentivizes this behavior. So we want the Frax use case to be as successful as possible. We basically want as much FrxETH, as much Frax stablecoin, whatever, to get thrown into these new systems, to basically be locked up for a month, for a year, and just prove that the system works end to end, right? And once that's happening, the path to adopting other protocols, I think, is pretty straightforward. And then in terms of what you actually do with the 1155 token, right now, in the very, very beginning, we're just going to create the token. We're not even going to launch anything that you can do with it. But we have a lot of work that's been done on stuff you can do with it. And the community's been working really hard on that too. So that should be coming out in the next few months. And I'm sure you can start to brainstorm the different use cases.
Yeah, this is quite the monumental moment for Frax because this is the first. I mean, Pitch was one of the first major protocols to build on Frax, and now Hourglass is, it's instead of going for governance like you did with Pitch, you're going for the liquid markets themselves, and you're this is quite the really is quite a big step for Frax as an ecosystem and as a community for this type of market to be available and traded. It really puts it at a much bigger advantage than, let's say, other stablecoins or other protocols that don't incentivize lots of liquidity and that the mercy of mercenaries, quite literally. But here, we're all missionaries here, and we're all Frax is big on the positive sum ethos. This really fits into it quite well, and you did a pretty good job of that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I want just to give a big shout out to Sam for designing a lot of the core Legos that we even considered when designing a system on top of it, right? If it wasn't for Frax being fractionalized, they probably wouldn't have had unlocked liquidity because they needed it to save the peg. And now that they have the system, it's worked great. But I think this layer on top will facilitate a lot of new interesting things they can build. I mean, the first is, say people lock up FrxETH for, say they extend the time from 1 year to 5 years or 1 year to 10 years. Now there's 5-10 year locked FrxETH and people want to sell it. Well, now Frax the protocol can potentially buy back their own FrxETH. Maybe Frax mints FrxETH and then uses the new minted FrxETH to buy back the locked FrxETH on a market like this. And Frax can basically set their own bids and asks for protocol buybacks.
It's a whole new avenue for them to conduct monetary policy.
Exactly.
It's
this
a
is
whole
sort
new
of
dimension, quite literally.
the time dimension.
Yeah, Charlie, just kind of expounding a bit more on like the future use cases of the 1155s. Is it possible for someone to basically round up all of these 1155 tokens and print an ERC20 against that and have that as like the more liquid tradable form of like tranches of all of these locked liquidity?
That's interesting. I hadn't even really considered that before. I mean, you can't change the duration of an individual lock because otherwise you could grief somebody else, right? You could extend their lock for them. But there's no reason that, say you wanted to create some flavored product where you bought a bunch of the 1 month, a bunch of the 3, and a bunch of the 6, and then you constantly kept rebuying so that this thing is like a blend of all of that. You could definitely build that on top of this, right? Like our goal is to provide the most precision possible so people can express individual times. And then if someone wanted to aggregate that and create some bundled token and then maybe trade around the bundled token instead, no reason they couldn't do that.
I just wonder how you incentivize liquidity for that ERC20 token.
I'm not sure. I mean,
I think
we as
tricky
Hourglass
issue.
wouldn't be the ones doing that. But if someone wanted to say that they wanted to create like it's effectively, I think, similar to a CDO, right? Where you're batching together, or maybe you take the 3 month from Lido, the 3 month from Coinbase, the 3 month from Frax, because say all of these protocols turn on their own version of this, right? Now you have these 3 month flavors across the gate. Then you can like aggregate the credit risk, I guess is how you would describe it in traditional terms. But and then you could have folks buy that, but we're not particularly interested in doing that ourselves.
All right, Charlie, I have a question. We've been quite high level this whole interview, but I want you to explain Hourglass to me like I'm 5. I want you to explain it in the simplest terms. Yes, Kit?
Sorry, before we get there, I finally spent the 40 minutes here sitting here thinking of one flaw, and I want to ask you first.
We got the flaw.
Before we go there.
All right.
Wouldn't you say that this would cannibalize the locking, the organic locking demand? Like people would rather just purchase these discount locks rather than locking themselves. So Frax would never really increase that lock liquidity TVL.
Great. That is actually a fantastic point, and I just thought of it a few days ago. I think,
Oh, he has an answer for you.
yeah.
Oh, so you see, it took him a
Let's
few days. I got it for 40 minutes though, so points for me too.
I think that only would happen if everyone's trying to dump their locks early, right? If the whole universe is saying, "Oh, I expire in 3 months. I need to get out right now," then of course the person would go and sweep that. But I would imagine that the folks who are buying these different time locks, right, that might be a sophisticated financial actor who runs models for time, and they might do this for traditional markets. The person who's staking in the Frax ecosystem might not be a very sophisticated person. They might just be a Frax supporter who's saying, I want to support Frax for the next 6 months. And if they wanted to go buy the discounted lock off the person, they might be there too late because you probably would have people auto like bot sniping these things as they get listed for sale because they would already have programmatic opinions like this thing is worth 2%, and if you buy it at higher than that, like that's just not a smart thing to do. That might be their opinion, right? So maybe someone would come and buy it for more than it's worth, and that would be kind of interesting. That would sort of affect the yield curve of the product. But I think those two individuals are sort of different user personas.
I mean, that would be incredible arb if everyone just dumped their, long-term lock liquidity. Like, wouldn't somebody just come in and sweep that up?
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but at a certain discount, I think almost
Yeah,
anyone
it depends
would,
on
right?
your
If
risk
it's
model.
99%
Yeah,
off.
Yeah.
dude, if ETH offers even a 25% off, I'll probably scoop
Yeah.
some right now, right? 50%, I will scoop a lot more. At 75%, it probably has, I'm levered long, irresponsibly.
Yeah.
So,
Like, the fact that this is, around Shanghai right now, you're coming out with this, pretty eminently. It could not be a better time, especially with these withdrawal queues. And I'd imagine there'd be markets for these withdrawal queues and Hourglass to be the venue for those to appear.
That's a great question. So we've actually been talking for the last couple of days about building something like this because it works the same way with our system, right? Instead of someone locking in and getting the receipt, we would instead have a withdrawal queue where someone basically says, I'd like to withdraw my ETH, and then in doing so, they withdraw through our sort of proxy smart contract, and they give the withdrawal rights to the smart contract. Then they get this receipt, and then as soon as the withdrawal is done, they can transfer the receipt and basically swap it for the underlying that gets withdrawn. So say you enter the queue and you're not actually going to unstake from Lido for 3 months. Well, now you effectively have a 3-month lock on your ETH, right? You're saying in 3 months, this will be liquid ETH. And that might be a great place to sort of just test the initial version of this.
It sounds kind of similar to Eigenlayer.
Yeah, so I think the design of Eigenlayer is quite clever, where you sort of hand over the slashing rights to a smart contract. In this case, you could sort of think of Hourglass as you're giving the unlock rights. You're giving the time rights to a smart contract. And then once you've done that, you can build pretty much an infinite number of things on top of it.
Got it. I was going to go with my expand like I'm 5 question, but Kit, did you have any follow-ups to this?
no, please explain like we're 5.
Yeah. Like, how would you, in like the simplest terms, I'm like off the street or I have minimal knowledge of DeFi and like base knowledge of finance, like, or like what would be like a nice example or metaphor you would describe Hourglass with?
Yeah, so I think it's actually apt because when you're usually a kid, someone at some point explains to you about the time value of money. They'll say that if I give you $100 a year from now, that's not the same thing as if I give you $100 today. Because say I gave it to you today, you'd have a whole year of things you could do with it. You could go buy hot dogs, or you could invest it, or you could do a lot of stuff, right? Time has very intrinsic value, and there aren't very, very precise ways to measure it, but there are pretty good ways. And today in the DeFi and general crypto ecosystem, there's almost no way to express that value. There's no way to say, I'm committing to you a protocol for a year, and I think I should be valued at more for that. Or the vice versa. I have a token that in 1 year is worth something. I think you should pay me X price for it, right? So we're effectively trying to add the time value of assets to the whole crypto ecosystem.
So, working with time like this, have you thought about the history of time and keeping track of time, and what has been kind of like the dominant ways people have judged their lives? For example, I'm going to be dramatic. For example, back during the agricultural revolution, like people just kept track of the seasons and kept track of the sun, and then fast forward, blah blah blah. Industrial revolution, all this. People had clocks that keep track of like people's shifts and what, and has this made you think about time differently?
Yeah, it's definitely made me get more probably precise with it. I haven't been thinking about it quite as much on sort of the galactic level, though I did actually just get an interesting book on, I think it's called The Secret Pulse of Time, and it's about these phenomena, right? sundials and all the ways that
Yeah.
we've measured it. But I just haven't actually dug as deep until now about how much a day is versus a month. And there's a lot of probability involved. Like, how much is 1 month of loyalty worth to you if you're Lido, right? It's probably like, what is the probability that in the next month you would leave, and say it's 50%, then if I can get you for the whole month, then clearly that's 50% better than, like, you can basically start to run calculus like this. And a lot of it is trying to guess sort of how the universe will play out, which is a hard equation.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I'm just thinking about people, farmers like selling their crops and they want to sell a future on it. They want some guarantee. This is kind of similar to that as well. Like they want some guarantee on like their stake yield. Actually, maybe not too similar, but some derivative. They're both derivatives in some sense.
Yeah, so I know that the origin of futures was exactly that. It was you had to sell some crops in the future and you don't know how many you're going to have, so you can set up a contract to guarantee that. And interestingly, that kind of stuff was never built in the crypto world. Instead, they just built a bunch of things called perps, which aren't quite the same functionality as a futures contract. Yeah, you're no longer ensuring that the future will be okay. Now you're providing a funny instrument to basically leverage and borrow against your own assets. That was sort of the key innovation. My hypothesis for why this was the case is that it's been really hard to build contracts on the blockchain that actually represent and resemble a real world contract, right? If you were settling actual wheat prices on the blockchain and you needed a month or something until they were delivered, maybe you would build this. But because the Oracle problem has been so bad, the Oracle problem meaning it's hard to transmit real information into the blockchain in a way that's reliable, no one's done it. So there's been no need for a futures contract because there's been no wheat. There's been no real productive loans happening at scale. But luckily, I think in the next 1 to 3 years, these problems are being solved. Every day you have more work done on privacy, on identity, on scaling, on sort of the necessary prereqs to import these instruments. And eventually, I think actually all of the stuff we're building could theoretically be used for everything there, right? There's no reason that you can't apply this exact same modeling to those things as well. But for the time being, I think the first real use case of this on the blockchain is just expressing loyalty. It's saying, I'll give you a token for 6 months instead of for a day. And please, I hope I get rewarded for my commitment.
Is there a particular innovation in DeFi or in crypto or in blockchain in general that you're excited about that could really supercharge Hourglass?
There's a lot. I mean, the conferences for the last 6 months have never been as good as I've ever seen. Like, everyone is incredible right now working in the scaling space. I think that the rollouts of these L2s are really exciting with the new ZK Sync, obviously Optimism, Arbitrum, etc. And we're excited to deploy on each of those. I think something like Base is really exciting for onboarding the next 10 million plus users and getting more folks involved. I think everything on the privacy space, there's just a lot. Like literally, if you go across the major
privacy,
assets,
that would be a big one, especially in like your kind of market.
Yeah, so obviously none of this has been built, and we're going to have to sort of monitor the community. But I can see a universe where one day other types of stuff beside locked FrxETH are on here, and folks might be interested in buying or selling or just transacting with it, but they need to know their counterparty. And you could definitely build some sort of either a private version, or an institutional version where maybe people can only put on signatures if they're on a whitelist, and then you have to perform some requirement. And then you have different flavors, basically, of the product.
All right, Charlie, this is your call to action. What would you say to people that want to contribute to Hourglass? They hear this podcast, they're really interested, and they want to get involved. Like, what's the best way to do that? And what are you looking for?
Yeah, so first, just reach out on Twitter or Discord. We have a Discord server with lots of stuff and an active community member, bunch of community. Or shoot us a note on Twitter anytime if you want to get involved. We're always looking for more contributors at the development level or on the marketing side. And it's pretty cool because the communities organically come up with a lot of these ideas. Like, I'm the one talking about it now, but most of them are not even mine. So that's sort of the first high-level thing. If you're a protocol and you're interested in this, please reach out and we can talk about setting up some sort of long-term liquidity system with your protocol. We're shooting actually for the next 3 to 6 months to build a permissionless version of the system where a protocol can come and just click a few buttons and deploy their own ecosystem. And we don't even need to worry about it. I think something that OpenSea did really, really well is let anybody spin up their own NFT collection. They have a great how-to guide. I take it as a strong inspiration, and we're going to do everything we can for that same idea. And then if you're a user and you want to try it out, Well, our product should be live with docs and all of that stuff out just
All
in the
the
next
fun
couple
stuff.
weeks. Yeah, all the fun stuff. So reach out anytime.
And out of everything from this interview, what do you want people to take away most about Hourglass?
Yeah, just that time has value, right? And I think it's important that we value each other's time, we value our own time, and that you make sure you're treating yourself well and not spending it on things that don't contribute to your life. So
Stop scrolling, everyone. Go touch grass. Go outside.
that's
We're
right.
outside. This is a great decision.
It's nice, right? It's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like you guys are
Kit,
having a
did you
good
have any
time.
more questions?
And yes, last question to kind of put a bow on it. What does success look like for Hourglass?
Yeah, so I think it's a new paradigm in the whole ecosystem, right? It's that if all of these different ecosystems start adopting time into their calculus and they say we're not just going to give out tokens for LPs, we're not going to give out tokens for whatever, just for a day, we really want to make sure that people commit and that these systems won't disappear tomorrow. I think what would be really cool is if you look at the DeFi Llama sort of TVL charts, you don't just see these enormous wicks where everyone just pulls out immediately. Um, and eventually that you could even use systems like this to prevent things like bank runs. I mean, bank runs are very complicated, right? There's a lot of things that go into solving that problem. But I think having ladders of commitments so that you can only withdraw so much per day or that you need to wait buffers before you can leave, that structurally actually fixes a lot of the bugs introduced from instantaneous mobile banking and other phenomena.
Well said. Very exciting stuff here. It's rare that you see like actual innovation in DeFi. Everything's just like a copycat of a copycat of a copycat. But like this is I'm really excited to see this out in the wild. Kit, since Charlie is one, are you our first return guest? I guess first return solo guest.
Oh, right. I think
Yeah.
so.
So
think
we
so.
got the fire round. But we'll come up with questions on the spot. Okay, I'll ask first. What is what was your favorite childhood cartoon?
Oh, good question. It wasn't on the TV, but I love Calvin and Hobbes. I've read every comic.
Oh,
Which one?
Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh, Calvin Hobbes. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
and Peanuts.
all right. All right. So my turn. Charlie, what is the best crypto event?
ETH Denver 2023 was the highest signal to noise ratio I've ever been to. I mean, I spent meaningful time with builders across the space. Sriram from Eigenlayer, I haven't even brought him up yet, but I've been chatting with him probably once every like 2 weeks for the last 6 months. And there's some real innovation happening across the spectrum. We're doing everything we can to, number one, use Eigenlayer, maybe even set up restaking for our own application level. And then number two, maybe even support Eigenlayer with the time value of restaking, right? Say you want to restake your ETH with Chainlink because you want to secure an Oracle. There's no reason that Chainlink might not incentivize long-term restaking as well. So if we can sort of help be a layer on top of Eigenlayer, that'd be awesome too. And there was just so much awesome stuff happening at the event. It's great to see everyone.
All right. What is one thing that you're super excited about that's outside of crypto?
The summer. I love the sunshine.
That's why
yeah,
we're
Wow.
out here.
we're in
So
LA,
wholesome.
so that'll be fun.
All right. And then if you could have a dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would that be?
Oh, there's so many good options right now.
You'd had a feast.
I would have a feast for sure. I think right now it would have to be somebody. I mean, I would need more time to come up with a full answer, but the first thing that comes to mind is probably like a Sam Altman type or someone in the San Francisco AGI community, because I think that that is one of the first like legitimate philosophical advances that's permeated the cultural zeitgeist in a while. And I know everything I've read online, and I read about it quite actively. We use ChatGPT and all of the tools for our own development, but I'd love to learn more. Right? I think that there's always so much to explore in that part of the world. In fact, if I could have a dinner with anybody, it would be an AGI. It would be an autonomous artificial general intelligent robot. That'd be cool.
And a quick follow up to that. Who would you recommend that Flywheel should host on our next episode?
That's a good question. I mean, it depends if you want to have more builders in the ecosystem, in which case I have lots of friends who build across the ZK space. If you'd like to interview any of them, friend Jules. my friend Luke. I think they'd be great. You want more on the investment side, I think. Avi, like there's just a lot of great sort of thought leaders in the space, everyone from Avi Chal from Electric to other large institutions that could be great at providing more of a higher level perspective on how the whole ecosystem is evolving.
We're gonna have to hit you up for intros after this.
Would love to, man. Would love to.
Charlie,
And then I
thank you for
have
coming on.
a last question
Oh,
real quick.
wait,
Dave.
we got one more. We got one more.
One
Yeah.
more. I got one more in the chamber.
One more.
And this one is,
We got you still here.
yes. What do you want the people to know about you that, people would not expect?
My DMs are open. DMs are always open.
His DMs are open, ladies.
No, not. I mean, and they're open for conversation.
Got it. All right.
All right. Charlie, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man. This is
Round
super
two,
fun.
a huge success. Excited to have Hourglass on in the future and to see the launch and future success of Hourglass.
Yeah, man. It'll be really fun. Reach out anytime online, and you should see stuff very quickly in Twitter. So follow along.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, bro.
This is going to get cropped anyways. All right. Welcome to the post game. We just sent Charlie away so we could talk, the three of us. We're going to say all the bad things about Charlie while he
Yeah,
doesn't
because
have
that
his
was
headphones
such
on.
an awful interview. I was so disappointed.
Finally. It's
Yeah.
finally over.
Oh, it's over.
Finally
God. Yeah.
Well, guys, this seems like Charlie's built a nice mechanic. It sounds good. I hope that this can attract some decent liquidity once they launch.
Yeah, no, I'm super fascinated. And I said this in the interview about it being an actual innovation in DeFi, and it actually takes time into account when creating these markets, basically. And it's encouraging an activity that's much needed in DeFi, which is having liquidity locked. Something which Charlie mentioned, Frax pioneered and probably saved Frax's ass during all the major events of the past year or so. And so he's really bringing that concept into a mass scale. So
You know what I'd
pretty
love
cool.
to see this paired with is like an Arrakis pool.
I
where-
said that to him last night.
Yes. I would love to see okay, so sure, Uniswap V2 is inefficient, but just give it to Arrakis. Lock my money with Arrakis, send it away for 2 to 3 years, and give me a nice return.
Me and Charlie had dinner last night so I could prepare for this interview, and I asked him exactly that. I'm like, that would be perfect. Like,
Perfect.
Knowing that there's guaranteed inventory for X amount of time.
Because I think you know what I've seen as an emerging narrative in the
What?
past days, even, is that the general crypto community is turning hard on market makers.
Yeah, that's
Wintermute
coming.
is now like a lot of people are coming out, especially it's because of this Arbitrum shit, right?
Arbitrum, yep.
Yeah. So because of the Arbitrum shit, everybody's coming out and telling their stories about how market makers fuck them over and about how they essentially take all the tokens, they sell all them off, they cover their expenses.
Oh, this is a perfect narrative for Arrakis.
Exactly. And so I think this idea of locked liquidity, because think about it, right? Where, if you're a LP in a locked pool, right? All the trading fees that come through you go to that pool, right? And you don't have to pay a market maker who they're doing God knows what outside of your purview, right? You don't really have access to what they see. And they're making profits based on a loan that you gave to them. And once they make enough money to cover that loan, they can do whatever they want. They could dump all the tokens down to zero. Right. And it's not really aligned. So Charlie's infrastructure is just another piece of the system that aligns the whole DeFi ecosystem. Right. And it's again, trying to address some of these SVB problems.
Yeah. And it's funny because the villains of yesteryear were VCs, and now the villains of today are market makers. Of course, in the bull markets, the VCs. And of course, in the bear markets, the market makers.
I just feel it's a little naive to completely dismiss the market makers outright. They do facilitate, quite a role. It's just their role in the crypto space is just outsized relative to their normal role in the TradFi space. And unfortunately, all the volume in crypto still takes place on centralized exchanges. And on there, you kind of have no choice but to rely on a market maker. Sometimes you can't even get a listing without a market maker already signed up to market make on your pairs. So, that is a necessary evil per se. But I feel the predatory terms of most or almost all of these market making agreements are quite egregious. I think that should definitely be changed.
It's inspiring how much like industry change Frax has brought about, right? As the first one to like have locking liquidity or like locked liquidity for every single pair that they offered that like nobody else was doing off the bat, right?
Yeah.
Like 3-year locks as well too, which are significant for like a brand new DeFi project that was like just out the gate, right? And we know how like at the time like that there was a lot of other algo stable coins which were just going down the shitter. And so it was a big risk, but it really paid off for them. And it probably saved our asses during the FTX collapse, during the Luna collapse.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
I don't think Frax would be here if there wasn't for locked liquidity.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be an easy sell for Hourglass where, like all you have to go do is just tell these projects like, hey, like give us your tokens. We're going to lock them up. And they stay locked because the majority of issues come from people yield farming where they deposit their LP for a short amount of time. They farm in a highly competitive environment. And when the edge is gone, they pull their LP back and they leave.
Oh, I thought of something. Do you think that Yearn could incorporate, participating in these markets in their strategies, like buying discounted Frax?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and discounted FrxETH, and just waiting till maturity. And, it's interesting how they'll calculate that in the future. I'll leave it up to them.
It should be a very like easy, like bond pricing is a very easy thing, right? And if there's going to be a variety of discount rates because there's not like one. Frax doesn't have like an interest rate, right?
No.
Per se that it has, not like the DSR or something. But once you have a discount rate, you can just say like, we have an edge. We have a 1% edge here versus the discount rate that we have on our books. We'll just buy it up, right? And it should create a really nice tight market for whatever sort of LP they're buying.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how tactical kind of Charlie would have to be for like new projects. Because right now, I think a very hurdle that Charlie has to overcome is lock liquidity should have been the norm from day one, but it isn't. And everybody wants that liquidity while still expecting token emissions and yields. Therefore, projects have to offer that. So, now to ask the project to, hey, curtail your token emissions going to the liquid and create this new token emission plan for the lock liquidity. I think there's going to be a lot of friction from the community. You'll probably see a lot of LP pooling, and I think so. I think that the transition part is going to be difficult.
I mean, BD's always tricky.
No, I'm just going to hop in. So I think from the protocol level, it's an easy sell to the protocol because you say, hey,
let's get
your guys locked up for a year. And the protocol should have like political buy-in from their users, right? And once the incentive starts to flow, I don't know. I think like the people that want to LP for long periods of time will just see it as, oh, hey, I can make it like an extra 7% or something, right?
Right, but that's assuming you're not reducing the liquid LPs. If you're reducing the liquid LPs, they'll be like, well, shit, I went from earning 7 now down to 4. I might not want to LP anymore, and they would pull. Right?
Yeah, but I don't think it matters, right? Because like at the end of the day, you're you're only like this product is only built for those people who are like long-term supporters of liquidity in your project.
No, it does matter
It's a
because
missionary
you're
protocol.
reducing my yield. You are reducing my yield that I used to get as a liquid LP. And now you're diverting
Sure.
some of that to the locked LP. So, and I don't
Sure.
want to do that. So
But
I'm
shouldn't
going to have to, liquidity is going to go down is my point.
I don't think so.
We'll have to see it play out on
Exactly.
chain.
Exactly. Dave, what were you going to say before I hopped in?
I forget.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, I love Charlie coming back on. I feel like having a repeat guest just really elevates the interview or the pod just because we have chemistry and we just vibe better, in my opinion. We should do a roundup now. It's almost
think
a
about
year's
how
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Flywheel year in review. And like it's amazing to see how much Charlie has grown and how much, Hourglass has grown from, what it started out as pitch to where it is now. You can tell Charlie's been very thoughtful about it and very intentional in how he built it.
I'm really excited to see you relaxed and moisturized and
Me?
And in your lane.
and mustache and in your lane, exactly. At the piff pad.
At the yeah, the HQ. Sweet. And if you want to keep up, if you want to catch any returning guests, make sure you hit that bell button because they'll be on in the future, and you want to catch that. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at Flywheel DeFi, join the conversation on Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
And you can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And I'm at traders_inside.
And we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Everything said on this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.